The Fall of Saigon, the end of the Vietnam War. The Fall of Saigon marked a dramatic and chaotic end to the Vietnam War, symbolizing the collapse of the South Vietnamese government and the definitive victory of North Vietnamese forces. This pivotal event unfolded on April 30, 1975, culminating years of conflict and leading to profound changes in the region and the world. This is the story of the desperate evacuation, the final moments of the battle, and the human impact of the war's conclusion. In the final days of April 1975, the situation in South Vietnam was dire. North Vietnamese forces had launched the spring offensive, rapidly advancing towards Saigon. The South Vietnamese army, despite years of US support and training, was unable to halt the onslaught. The streets of Saigon were filled with fear and uncertainty as the communist forces drew closer. April 28, 1975. The US government, recognizing the imminent fall of Saigon, initiated Operation Frequent Wind, the largest helicopter evacuation in history. The plan was to evacuate American citizens, South Vietnamese allies, and at-risk individuals from Saigon to US Navy ships in the South China Sea. The operation was a race against time, with North Vietnamese artillery already within range of the city. In preparation for the evacuation, the US Embassy in Saigon became a hive of activity. Ambassador Graham Martin, despite his initial reluctance, ordered the evacuation as the situation deteriorated. Embassy staff, Marines, and other personnel worked around the clock to prepare for the massive airlift. Helicopters from the 7th Fleet, including CH-53 Sea Stallions and CH-46 Sea Knights, were readied for the mission. April 29, 1975. As the evacuation began, the US Embassy in Saigon became a focal point of chaos. Thousands of desperate South Vietnamese civilians gathered outside the embassy gates, hoping for a chance to escape. Inside the compound, American personnel worked frantically to process evacuees and coordinate the helicopter airlift. The rooftop of the embassy became an iconic image of the evacuation, with helicopters ferrying people to safety under the constant threat of enemy fire. Amidst the turmoil, many individual stories of bravery and despair emerged. Some South Vietnamese soldiers fought to the end, while others discarded their uniforms and tried to blend in with civilians. Families were separated in the crush of people trying to reach the helicopters, and many faced the heartbreaking reality that they would not make it out. The scene at the embassy was chaotic. Marines formed human chains to keep the crowd from overwhelming the landing zone, while embassy staff called out names from a list of those authorized to evacuate. Helicopters arrived every 10 minutes, but it was clear that not everyone would be saved. April 30, 1975. The North Vietnamese forces entered Saigon, meeting little resistance. The South Vietnamese government had effectively ceased to function, and President Duong Van Minh, who had only recently taken office, surrendered unconditionally. North Vietnamese tanks rolled through the streets of Saigon, and the flag of the Viet Cong was raised over the presidential palace. The fall of Saigon marked the official end of the Vietnam War, but it also began a new chapter of hardship for many. Thousands of South Vietnamese, who had worked with the Americans or the government, faced retribution from the victorious communist forces. Many were sent to re-education camps where they endured harsh conditions and forced labor. The evacuation also saw the USS Midway play a crucial role. This aircraft carrier was instrumental in rescuing thousands of refugees, including many South Vietnamese military personnel and their families. The ship's crew worked tirelessly to accommodate the influx of evacuees, demonstrating remarkable humanity and resourcefulness. Captain Lawrence Chambers, commanding officer of the USS Midway, made the decision to push helicopters overboard to make room for more refugees. This act of compassion saved countless lives, and highlighted the desperate circumstances of the evacuation. The evacuation was not without its logistical challenges and heartbreak. Equipment and personal belongings were abandoned in the rush to escape. Vehicles, weapons, and even entire aircraft were left behind, creating a haunting image of the sudden and complete American withdrawal. The sight of abandoned UH-1 Huey helicopters on the decks of the USS Midway became symbolic of the chaos and urgency of the evacuation, consequences, and aftermath. The fall of Saigon had profound and far-reaching consequences. For the United States, it marked the end of a long and controversial involvement in Vietnam, raising questions about the costs and consequences of the conflict. The images of the evacuation, particularly the scenes at the U.S. Embassy, became symbols of the war's chaotic end and the human cost of geopolitical struggles. The rapid advance of North Vietnamese forces and the swift collapse of the South Vietnamese government underscored the limitations of U.S. military intervention and the challenges of nation-building. The fall of Saigon also led to a period of intense reflection and reassessment of American foreign policy and military strategy. For the people of South Vietnam, the fall of Saigon marked the beginning of a difficult and often traumatic period. The new communist government implemented widespread changes, including land reforms, collectivization, and re-education programs. Many South Vietnamese who had supported the former government or worked with the Americans faced persecution and imprisonment. The humanitarian crisis that followed the fall of Saigon was severe. Hundreds of thousands of people fled the country, seeking refuge in neighboring countries and beyond. The plight of the boat people, who risked their lives to escape by sea, highlighted the desperation and fear that gripped the population. International efforts to resettle refugees brought attention to the human cost of the conflict and the need for global cooperation in addressing the crisis. Legacy and reflection. The fall of Saigon remains a defining moment in the history of the Vietnam War and a powerful reminder of the complexities and tragedies of armed conflict. It serves as a testament to the resilience and courage of those who lived through it, and a cautionary tale about the challenges of foreign intervention and nation-building. Today, the memory of the fall of Saigon continues to shape the collective consciousness of Vietnam and the United States. It stands as a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made by those who fought and the enduring impact of war on individuals and societies. As we reflect on the fall of Saigon, we honor the bravery and resilience of those who experienced it. Their stories remind us of the human cost of war and the importance of striving for peace and reconciliation in a world often marked by conflict and division.